So just as he thought 2022 couldn't get any more crazy than it already has, we hear the word recession. A lot of experts have mentioned it, a lot of people, a lot of media outlets are speculating about the possibility of a recession, and there are already a lot of YouTube videos on the topic. So I decided that I'd do a video to put in my 2 cents on the topic. Rather than just give you a list of things to do, I'm going to walk you through my thought process that I myself went through recently as I was assessing my preparedness were a recession to hit. So let's get into the video.
Money. My name is Johnny. Thank you for joining me for this video. Let's get this money.
So we're at the halfway point of 2022. It's crazy to think, right? So this for me is time for me to review my budget for the year, have a look at what I've spent already, what I expect to spend based on the evolving situation over the course of the year, and review my financial goals to see if I need to change my strategy or approach at all. So as I was doing this review, I did factor in the possibility of a recession because there are a few indicators that are suggesting that a recession might come. So in the US, the first quarter of the year's GDP growth was negative. There is very high inflation at the moment and consumer spend is starting to slow down. So there are a couple of signs there that mean that a recession could be coming. Now the best case scenario is that the recession might not be that bad and you make it through unscathed. It is worth being prepared. So to help you assess how prepared you are and determine the action you need to take, I'm now going to walk you through my thought process and decision-making process as I went through my mid-year financial review. So before you even think about taking any action, you need to assess your current financial situation. So you need to understand how much money you've got in the bank right now, what assets, what liabilities you have, and what your current spending habits are. So the best way to assess that is to use tools like a budget tracker, if you've got a banking app that consolidates all your accounts into one place, or even a net worth tracker as well to list all of your assets and all of your liabilities. If you're looking for a net worth tracker, you can download mine from my Etsy store. I'll leave the link in the video description. Because in order to make decisions, you need to have the facts, you need to have the information, and these are essentially the key pieces of information that you're going to use to make the decisions further on as we go through the thought process. Now the next step assumes that you've been doing some kind of personal finance tracking up to this point, and the next step involves reviewing your goals up to this point. So if your goal was to save up for a house, for a holiday, for a car, invest more money, whatever it might be, just note it down somewhere, whether it's your phone, a piece of paper, a laptop, and just keep it to the side for now. So you've got them there, but we're not going to look at them right now. And now from this point onwards, we're going to look at your preparedness for a crisis or a recession kind of situation. So we're going to break this down to short, medium, and long-term preparedness. What we might compare this to as an analogy is kind of, let's say, a crash, maybe a car crash. So your short-term preparedness is kind of your ability to take the initial impact. So when the car hits something, how protected are you for that initial impact? Then your medium-term preparedness might be how prepared are you for you to get out of the current situation, so escape from the crash or get out of the immediate danger. And then your long-term preparedness will be the ability to recover from that accident and return to normality, so to speak. So what things might we need in the short term to handle that initial impact from a recession or an economic crisis? So definitely an emergency fund that is funded with several months of living expenses or is big enough to cover a large expense. And perhaps also we might want to look at supplies, having an emergency reserve of supplies available as well in case there are shortages of food or whatever. So in order to prepare in the short term to build that emergency fund, a lot of people recommend 3 to 6 months emergency fund. Now this will all depend, of course, on your economic situation. Some people are even talking about building it up from 6 to 9 to even a full year, particularly if you are self-employed or you have a very volatile business, then a bigger emergency fund might come in more handy for you. So if you haven't got that emergency fund set up right away, you want to think about what's the quickest way that you can do that. Probably the most obvious one is dedicating a portion of your income towards it, setting money aside and building up that fund from that. Perhaps you've got items that you don't need anymore, bits of furniture or technology that you don't use anymore that you can sell, and then you can use some of the money of that to build up that emergency fund as well. And then in terms of supplies, you can never go wrong if you've got a little bit of spare food in the cupboards. Maybe and hopefully you don't need to use it and you can rotate some of that emergency stock into your regular food consumption to make sure it doesn't go out of date and whatnot. But it is good to have it there just in case. So once we're prepared to take the initial impact, we need to think about medium term. So for me, medium term might be, how do we keep the blood flowing? How do we tread water and stay afloat? So for me, that's stuff like making sure that money is still able to come in. How can we bring money in? And how can we keep control of our expenses in the house? So one of the best ways to obviously keep money coming in is to add new income streams or diversify your current business. That could be starting a side hustle to bring in some extra income, or if you're self-employed, you might want to diversify into new business opportunities if you see the potential for some opportunities to make money outside of your regular income streams. And this doesn't just have to apply to self-employed people or entrepreneurs. If you work for a company full-time or part-time and your employment contract permits you to do a gig on the side, then it might be something to consider so that you have an additional source of income as well, should the main one be affected for whatever reason. And if you are thinking about a side hustle, it's best to get started right away, because when crisis time comes, it will be too late. It's better to get it up and running and get that cash flowing in as soon as possible. And once you've got money coming in as well, you of course need to make sure that your expenses are staying below your income. Now, what this looks like will be different for many people, but probably for a lot of people, it might involve cutting back on some discretionary spending, let's call it. So particularly categories like entertainment, subscriptions, perhaps clothes or gadgets that you normally buy might be an area to consider. Of course, up to you how you manage your spending and what areas you decide to cut back on, but definitely make sure that you've got your key expenses such as your rent or your mortgage, your utilities and your food and then transportation costs covered. All right, so we're ready for the initial impact. We've got the ability now to get back on our feet. So now we can start thinking about the longer term. So is there any way we can improve our financial situation or seek out any opportunities as a result of a crisis that might come? Former British Prime Minister Winston Churchill once famously said, "Never let a good crisis go to waste." So what does he mean by that? It means that in crisis, there will be opportunities that come. As bleak and dire as it might look, there will be opportunities in this crisis. In reality, as a matter of fact, right now, of course, the stock market is currently down, the crypto market is completely crashed, and it looks like real estate might be slowing down as well. And though history isn't an indicator of future performance, we have seen time and time again in the past markets recover after many major crises and continue to trend upwards in the long term. Another long-term consideration we can make is if we have any debt or liabilities on our plate that could weigh us down, because if we're going through a tough economic time and we're trying to stay afloat, having the obligation that we owe somebody money is like trying to stay afloat with someone underneath the water pulling your leg down. It's going to make it harder and harder. So if you have the opportunity to pay off any debts you have, ideally before, but even during the crisis, once you've got the first few considerations covered, then this is a good thing to do, because it will really make staying afloat much easier, and it will take a massive weight off your shoulders as well. Now, just before I finish, very quickly coming back to what we were saying about your goals at the start. So essentially we put them to one side so that we could work through this process. So the key priority is really going through the process, making sure you're prepared in the short, medium and long term. Once you feel that you're best prepared in all of those three steps, then you can come back to your goals and see if they are feasible still within the current climate and context. It might be that you need to pause saving for that holiday or for that car that you're trying to save up for, or it might be that you need to focus on tackling that debt rather than work towards your other financial goals. In any case, keep them in mind, but do make sure you're prepared for the crisis before you come back and look at them. So I hope you find this video helpful and interesting, guys. There's obviously been a lot of videos done on this topic already, so I've tried to put a bit of an original spin on it and try and give my own thoughts as well. And whether or not a recession does or doesn't come, it is always better to be prepared. Leave a comment and let me know if you've lived through a recession in the past, or if you're preparing for the current one. I'd love to hear about your experience and what you're doing right now. Now, why not check out my other videos? And if you like this one and you want to see more content like this, then make sure you hit the subscribe button with the notification bell so that you don't miss a single update. I'll see you on the next one, and let's get this money.